Welcome to Orange Tofu Banana Hammock, the easy way to enjoy podcasts, online videos, and photography. This episode is two 30-minute episodes played back to back. The first is by Radiolab, the second is by Note to Self. It isn't about delusional extremists' paranoid fantasies of high-tech government surveillance. This is real high-tech government surveillance that should inspire extremists to have even more delusional fantasies.
Oh, wait, you're listening?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
You're
Listening
to Radiolab.
Radio
From
WNYC.
See?
Yep.
So how did you guys find out about this? How'd you get into it?
I think it was somebody was reading about it. Was it?
This is Manoush Zamarodi.
It was reading, or it was you reading about it?
Right.
Yeah, and that's her producer, Alex Goldmark.
And I just said his name is McNutt, and I just want to do a show
Sign
where
me
I
up.
get to say that name at least 10 times, please. But then, we actually read it, and it was weird and interesting, and brought up lots of issues.
Technology is remaking what is possible for individuals and for institutions and for the international order.
I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab. So here we are at this moment in time where we're faced with these decisions.
About what we want our future to look like, be like.
There are fewer and fewer technical constraints on what we can do. That places a special obligation on us to ask tough questions about what we should do.
Today we're going to look at the can and the should with our friends down the hall, Manoush Zamarodi and Alex Goldmark. They run a great podcast called Note to Self. They will be our guides into the world of
McNutt.
Yes, my name's Ross McNutt.
So the McNutt, as I refer to him, he's an ex-military guy.
Did 20 years in the Air Force. I enjoyed it. I did a lot of good.
like combat military.
He was an engineer in the military.
Yeah, I think he's actually special military.
My background, I've got a PhD in rapid product development out of MIT, and what I do is I teach young people how to build new systems.
And the new system, that's the system that we want to talk about, that kind of began in 2004. Ross was teaching a course at a military college.
I was at the Air Force Institute of Technology here at Wright-Patterson in Dayton.
He says one day in 2004, the whole school gathered together for a rally.
And our commander got up in front of the whole school and said, we need to do something to help the war effort.
Terrible violence today in the Iraqi city of Basra.
So at that time in the Iraq War,
Before the surge,
things were not going well.
Suicide bombs ripped through police buildings and city streets.
IEDs going off all over the place.
Constant news about IEDs going off everywhere, soldiers being blown up.
In 1 week, I got blown up 3 times.
And to be honest with you, in 2004, it looked like we were going to lose.
So Ross, he gets together some of his students, some of his colleagues, and they decide, let's sit down and see if we can quickly find a solution to figuring out who is planting all these roadside bombs.
Yeah, bombs going off are pretty easy to detect in images. The problem is, how do you go from a bomb going off backwards in time to be able to figure out who planted it? So somehow, it just came out. And
Was it like you guys sitting around?
It was at a bar. We were working on the back of a napkin and we're drawing out different ideas and throwing them around and seeing what happens.
They were just like, hey, let's use planes. Let's try this. Let's try that.
And then
They hit on it.
this one stuck and we sort of drew this out on the back of an envelope.
Making it took a little while.
I had 38 students working for me for 2 years.
But eventually they developed what became known as Project Angel Fire. And here's how it worked. They take a small plane, and on the belly of the plane, they hook up this array of cameras. It's sort of swivel around.
It's a camera system we design and build.
Super high-end. And then
Taxi, you're ready to go.
the pilot
Ready?
takes off, flies the plane high over Fallujah.
In the military, we were up at about 15 to 16,000 feet to stay out of the missile range.
Let's say I'm an Iraqi on the ground in Fallujah and I look up, what would I see?
You wouldn't see us. You wouldn't hear us or you wouldn't see us.
So you've got this plane flying just below the clouds, doing an orbit over Fallujah, circle, circle, circle.
For 6 hours at a time.
And every second,
Click, click, click. click.
Every second, it takes a still image of the entire city of Fallujah, 25 square miles, and then beams it down to an operator.
We take a picture, process it, downlink it, process it, downlink it every single second.
So the plane is snapping picture after picture after picture. But here's what makes the system so powerful. The operator on the ground has, let's say, an entire day's worth of these high-res pictures of the entire city of Fallujah. And then let's say there's an explosion.
Officials say at least 20 people were killed in explosions at a market.
And wounds 11 others.
First, the operator would pull up the most current image of the city, zoom into the place within Fallujah where it happened, and then click, 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 in 1 second increments, go back in time and see who was there, what happened.
When was the last time somebody fiddled around in that roadside?
spot.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, I've gone back 2 hours and, it's that car.
Fast forward, click, click, click. They can now follow that car forward in time to see where it goes.
And you see that it went to a house in another neighborhood 2 miles away. Well, that's where you dispatch your troops to right then.
Basically, we'd be able to send either the Special Forces in or the Marines in and sort of take appropriate action.
It's not like they release a lot of statistics about how well their technology has worked, but you will find several quotes from officers saying that, yes, Project Angel Fire did save lives. But the reason why we decided to do this story is because it's not just a military thing, right? Like with a lot of these technologies, they maybe start in the military, but then they trickle down all the way down to all of us. And actually, in this case, trickled down to Dayton, Ohio.
Ross Group Incorporated? You think that's it? Or I think that's a...
By his first name?
Yeah, it'd be weird.
Oh, you gotta go with the McNutt. Producer Andy Mills and I actually went to Dayton, Ohio to visit Ross at his business.
Persistent surveillance systems.
There it is.
Persistent surveillance systems.
Right.
That feels Orwellian.
Yep.
These are the lenses, and the motors here basically control it.
So first we went over to his workshop where he actually works and makes the cameras.
These are more powerful than some of the best military systems.
Like we could see him actually making them and how they get attached to the bottoms of the airplane.
Oh, so many airplanes.
Then we went over to the hangar where he has all the airplanes.
They're beautiful.
So overall, we've got 27 airplanes we operate.
After you guys.
Oh my God, it's big. And then he showed us their command center. And this is where you have a bunch of people sitting in front of these enormous screens. This is like your viewing room?
Yeah.
And this is where all the plane pictures end up. Because Ross's basic idea in taking this technology from Fallujah to a city like Dayton, Ohio, is basically this.
The U.S. cities have just as large a problem as we do in Afghanistan and Iraq, only it's not IEDs, it's crime.
We've had a lot of major events this year. We've had 4 officer-involved shootings so far this year. Our homicides are up this year.
So this is Dayton Police Chief Richard Beal.
BIEHL.
I talked to him last summer. A couple years ago, Ross called him up and was like, look.
A city like Dayton, Ohio, we've got 28,000 crimes a year, about 10,000 Part 1 crimes.
Murder, rape, assault.
10,000 Part 1 crimes comes out to be $480 million a year.
But McNutt is like for about the price of a police helicopter.
We believe that we would be able to decrease crime by 30 to 40%. 30% decrease in that is $155 million a year.
The Dayton police were like,
alrighty,
let's give it a shot.
We basically set up a test in June of 2012 for a 5-day flight.
Clear prop. Here we go.
To see for ourselves what it was capable of doing.
They sent the plane up in the air. It started doing its thing, just like in Fallujah. And within just a few hours,
there was a call of this breaking entering in progress with a description of a van.
It was an older white box truck, just a regular random moving truck.
This is Angie Horn. She's the one who called 911. She was just home on her lunch break, and she sees a moving van pull up in front of her neighbor's house. A guy gets out, breaks in, starts moving furniture out.
So we immediately called the police. They got there relatively quickly from what I remember, but he had already taken off.
Now, normally in a case like this, the police would be like, well, how do we follow him? We don't know where he went. But in this case, The police contact persistent surveillance systems, and ultimately they get connected to this guy.
My name is Alex Blassingame. I'm the senior analyst for the company.
Alex pulls up the image of Dayton, zooms in, clicks backwards about 5 minutes until he sees this little grainy white dot appear in front of her neighbor's house.
This is the vehicle here that we're wanting to track.
I'm sorry, what vehicle? I barely see anything.
Right. So the image looks real blurry, but the human brain and the human eyes are very, very evolved to pick out movement.
You gotta understand that from 2 miles up, a car looks just like a random shape. People, they look like pixels. Alex has trained himself to pick out movement.
I'm going to put a tag down on where he's
He
at.
places an orange circle over that random little shape, and then click, 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 he moves forward.
To follow him to his real-time location.
Alex follows it up some roads, finds out that it is parked in a parking lot.
6 blocks away.
He calls up the people in the field, goes, go over there. They get there, they see the guy, they see a truck full of stuff. They send a different cop over to pick up the witness. Witness goes, yep, that's the guy.
Oh,
so at this
the
point,
lady who called.
Yeah, this is minutes later.
No kidding.
That could have been a murderer, right? That could have been an armed robber. It could have been a lot of things.
This is so weird. This is like having a superpower.
It is.
This is actually better than Batman. You can't go back forth in time if you're a superhero.
I just feel sad. It's like we're all just these little dots.
It just seems like the antithesis of what a lot of police departments seem to be trying to do in the aftermath of Ferguson and Staten Island and other horrific things that have happened, which is getting the police on the streets, making personal connections, creating relationships.
There's nothing in this system that prevents you from having effective community policing at the same time. And oh, by the way, this may dramatically help that community relations. The reason they're putting body cams on police officers is to try to get the police officers to be more respectful because they can be seen. Well, this lets us watch all the officers in a 25 square mile area all at once.
But then you can watch so many other people all at once. Here's other things that people in Dayton do. Like Romeo and Juliet, they sometimes meet without their parents' permission in the playground and smooch. There are going to be divorce lawyers who are going to be tracking errant spouses. There are going to be traffic police who are watching who goes through the red light. There are going to be realtors who are wondering how many tenants do you really have in that building?
Right.
And I guess the thought might be that if the information exists that will show what my pixel was actually doing, then I'm a little less free.
There is a clear trade-off between security and privacy. And, in our major cities where we have, tens of thousands of major crimes, you are a lot less free when you can't leave your house at night.
There's obviously a huge advantage to knowing what you know, but then there's a huge thing to knowing what you know. I mean, knowledge all by itself is sort of is pregnant with funny.
Here's my problem with all of these privacy stories. It's like when you're talking about these technologies, the advantages are always so concrete, and the trade-offs always feel so abstract. I feel like there's something being lost here, but I can never quite put my finger on it. It's weird.
Oh, Jad, that weirdness that you're feeling?
Yes.
It's gonna get a lot weirder.
We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jenny Lanahan from Round Lake, New York. Radiolab is supported in part by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, enhancing public understanding of science and technology in the modern world. More information about Sloan at www.sloan.org.
It is dawn at Gettysburg.
Hey, this is Jad. We are at the Gettysburg Military Museum in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Radiolab is supported by Squarespace, an all-in-one website builder that empowers independent thinkers and enhances the creative process. Squarespace's beautiful website templates are so versatile that they hardly feel like templates at all. And with the bold cover pages feature, unleashing your ideas on the web has never been easier or more amazing. Visit squarespace.com/Radiolab for a free trial and 10% off. All right, back to the battle.
Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radio Lab, and we'll continue our collaboration with Manoush Samarodi and Alex Goldmark from Note to Self.
And our subject is, and remains, Eyes in the Sky.
And the situation when we left it is that Manoush and one of our producers, Andy Mills, had gone down to Dayton, Ohio to talk with Ross McNutt, check out his technology. And after the Dayton demo, how are you feeling about things?
Well, I was feeling like, you have not convinced me. I am not going for this. And then I saw Juarez, Mexico. And that, well, I mean, that's what made me start to think otherwise.
Juarez, especially at the time we did this, they averaged 300 murders a month and 52 kidnappings a week.
300 murders a month.
Yeah.
McNutt and the gang, they got a contract. We've been asked not to say for whom. And they went down south, set themselves up in a hotel room, got the plane up in the sky, and then whoever the client was started bringing them crime reports.
So this is kind of what you never want to see happen, but this is kind of why the system was up.
Alex pulls up on the screen this very grainy aerial shot of Juarez.
This is Juarez, Mexico.
It looks like any city, right? You've got like grids of streets and cars and houses. And then like over on the left of the screen,
there,
he points to this dark little square. It's a vehicle that's going down the street.
This is a female police officer. She was actually headed to work on this morning. So we'll kind of go through it here.
He starts at the beginning and you see there's her house and her car is parked outside. You see that like teeny little Pixel gets in her car.
She pulls out of her driveway. That was her home.
Starts to drive to work. And then
right when she leaves, if you look up here,
he points to the upper left of the screen.
Several cars were parked up on the corner. As soon as she left her driveway, those cars become active.
So this is a stakeout.
Yeah, they were waiting for her to leave.
He's so zoomed in that you can see it's like a tic-tac moving down the street. And then two more tic-tacs come alongside.
Until they get right about here.
He's clicking forward on the photo and you see...
that right there is a speed bump.
These cars just inch closer.
So she'll kind of hesitate there, which is unfortunate.
So she's driving down the street and there's these cars following behind her. And then there's this car up ahead of her.
A vehicle that had been parked here for 15, 20, 30 minutes all of a sudden backs out into traffic and seemingly slows them down, almost gets in an accident right here, which gives these guys enough time to catch up. This is where they're going to pull up beside her.
And then suddenly, Alex says,
right there,
this is the point. Where
here the first car pulls up and shoots her multiple times.
She was shot in the head.
Multiple times in the head, right here. She's actually going to roll through the intersection.
Her car continues to go even though she's been shot in the head.
There is a parked car behind this tree, and you'll actually see this parked car move when she runs into it. And then these guys take off.
It was not fun to watch. It was upsetting. But what happens next made me really start to understand what this technology is capable of.
I wanted to real quickly just show you some of the other
Ross walks in, he takes that moment, horrible moment, and then he starts to like shoot back and forth in time.
So suspect car 1, here's his path before the murder, here's his path after the murder.
He actually takes the two cars from that murder, and you see, he draws on the map, you see that they meet up with two other cars.
See that guy there?
That were involved in a different murder. Now, one murder becomes two cars become 4.
Car stops.
And if you follow all 4 of these cars, drawing lines as they move through the city, you find out who they meet up with. And 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, so on and so on. And you have all these lines crisscrossing the city, and then you see that a whole bunch of those cars are headed to one place.
This house appears to be their cartel headquarters.
And that's when you start to think, well, that's how you have to take something like this down. It's not a one-shot thing like solving the crime. It's about cracking an entire system.
In fact, This is Andy here. When I was doing some background research on this part of the story, I spoke with this one source from the U.S. government who told me that this information that Rasa just showed us, like, it was one of the primary tools used to dismantle an entire cartel in Juarez, and that apparently the leader of that cartel was responsible for something like 1,500 murders.
Whoa. So I got to ask again. So how are you feeling at this point? Are you happy or scared or I don't know?
I felt ashamed of myself because I thought, oh, the reason why I'm so excited about it is it's because it's in a country where I don't live and I'm an outsider and I think of it as being messed up. So it's okay for them, but it's still not okay for us. What did you think, Andy?
I mean, like, this is where I stopped being a good journalist because I picked a side. It feels wrong to not solve these crimes that we can solve.
And what if this plane is on top of New York?
Good.
God, really?
For me, it became...
But do you remember, like, after 9/11, when you'd walk down the street and you'd hear the F-16s circling over the city? And I just remember the feeling in my stomach was like nausea. Like, I felt sick. It felt gross. It felt like we had no autonomy over ourselves. And at that point, I was scared enough that I could live with it. But right now, I don't feel that way. And look, it's a very privileged position to be able to say that we shouldn't have it. I get that.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I became a convert because, like, somebody got kidnapped today. And if we had an eye in the sky, we might be able to get the kid back in a few minutes, hours. Compared to, like, you see the stats on Amber Alerts? They're not good.
Yeah, but what we're talking about is, like, and I'm not saying that I'm, like, anti-McNutt at all. But what I'm saying is, like, it's very easy to paint it as we're going to get bad guys, and I just don't think it's that simple. The McNutt and Co., they seem like decent people. They have set limitations for themselves. They have said they will not use photography that could get any closer. They've made a moral choice with that. How do we know other people will make the same moral choice? And
you're saying that even though this thing might solve a ton of crimes, might save lives, it's still not worth the risk because it just asks a level of trust in government that we shouldn't give. Is that what you're saying?
For now, yes.
So back to Dayton. What happened in Dayton?
Well,
I was pretty impressed.
After that 5-day demo, the police chief, Richard Beale,
I recommended that we enter into a contract with Persistent Surveillance Systems.
And so they took it to the city commission.
Hi, this is Carrie Gray.
Oh, hey, Carrie, it's Manoush in New York. And according to Carrie Gray,
Director of the City Commission Office for the City of Dayton, Ohio.
The committee saw the presentation and they liked it.
The City Commission was interested in the presentation.
But they decided that before they go forward, they should have a public forum so they could just, sort of hear from the people.
There was about 75 or so people there.
And he says that the people of Dayton, much like the people of Radiolab and Note to Self, were very divided.
A quarter of the people were supportive of this technology and they were frustrated with the amount of crime. Their belief was, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't care what people see me doing. We want this implemented and we want it implemented very broadly.
So a quarter of them were like, bring it on. They were basically in the Andy camp.
Woohoo!
But then there was another group, slightly smaller, but not by much.
Maybe 15%.
That was the Robert Manoush camp.
Who believed that this was a grotesque invasion of privacy, and some of the people spoke in very impassioned terms. So,
yay!
I think calling it grotesque invasion of privacy would pretty much reflect the way this group was feeling.
This group too.
And that there was no way that you could trust government with this volume of information and this breadth of information.
So you had your pros and your cons. The rest of the people, like the majority,
maybe had some feelings one way or another, but just didn't have enough information. And so they came and kind of asked questions.
Like, how long will persistent surveillance systems keep the images? 90 days. How far can they zoom in? Can they see my face? No. So they had a lot of questions, which Carrie seems to think that they could have answered. They could have gotten everybody on board. But in the end, even though the room was basically divided into 3 parts, the naysayers were so loud and so impassioned that they sort of defined the conversation.
As we do.
So we took that lesson to understand that there was going to be some significant education that was going to be needed and some significant hurdles that were going to have to be crossed before that we were able to do a broad-based implementation. And based on the amount of time that was going to have to be spent, we decided there were other more immediate techniques that could be used, that could be invested in, and we took the money that could have been spent on this and spent it on some other activities.
It seems like what you're saying is that like it was just going to be too hard to get people over the hurdle, so like, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
So the plan is off the table, so to speak.
It's off the table for right now, but that doesn't mean that it's never coming back on the table.
Which I think is fair to say is frustrating to him.
Right now, we've got about $150 million worth of proposals sitting out there for a large number of cities. Baltimore, Philadelphia. We've been to Moscow. We've been to London. That we're waiting for them to make decisions on. We've done Compton. Been to Rome.
So Compton's like maybe. Juarez is like maybe. Dayton is like maybe.
There's a whole lot of maybes out there.
And what McNutt and his team are doing now, and this is actually what they were doing when we went to visit them, they're analyzing...
What we're doing here in Dayton is we are looking at a turnpike or something?
Yeah, traffic in New Jersey. They're studying traffic problems.
We look at congested areas, which are typically, especially in that part of the country, exits and on-ramps, any kind of junction in a highway.
No, sometimes you just want to scream.
McNutt. I think that might be 10 times.
Thank you, Manoush.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, sure. Special thanks this hour, of course, to Manoush Samarodi and Alex Goldmark. Also to Dan Tucker and George Scholes. And I would urge everybody listening right now to go to iTunes and download the latest podcast from Note to Self. It's a show that's all about grappling with the difficult questions of living in a digital world. And their latest podcast, it's got a story that I don't believe anyone else has really told. It's a story about another kind of technology that can sort of see into your private spaces. And this one is arguably way more invasive than the one we talked about in this podcast. Note to Self on iTunes. Check it out. We'll also link you there from radiolab.org. I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
Thanks for listening.
Yep.
We'll be watching.
My name is Ms. Playroom. I live on Van Avenue in Dayton. I'm here to register my concern regarding the airborne surveillance that was discussed earlier.
A great eye, lidless, breathed in flames.
Do military contractors watch over the globe?
I'd also like to register my concern with the so-called surveillance program. This was the stuff of science fiction when Orwell wrote 1984.
Lidless.
Down here where I cannot see so clear.
What policies does Dayton have in place to prevent using the data in a racially biased way?
This piece was produced by Andy Mills, and we had original music from Dylan Keefe.
Received at 4:50 p.m.
Hey, it's Manoush Samarodi, the host of WNYC's Note to Self.
This is Alex Goldmark with the credits. Radiolab is produced by Jad Abumrad.
Their staff, our staff, includes Brenna Farrell, Alan Horn,
Dylan Keefe, Matt Keelty, Lynn Levy,
Andy Mills, Lateef Nasser, Melissa O'Donnell, Kelsey Padgett,
Ariane Wack, Molly Webster, Soren Wheeler, and Jamie York.
With help from Is it Damiano or Damiano? With help from Damiano Marchetti, Molly Jacobson, and Alexandra Lee Young.
Our fact checkers are Eva Dasher and Michelle Harris.
That's it, right? Okay, bye.
End of message.
I work in surveillance, and one of the things that happens is that you get people sending you handwritten letters, sometimes from jail. Some of these letters include references to mind control or aliens or Fidel Castro controlling their brain via radio waves. And this was like so many letters that I've received, right? So many people believe they have been secretly tracked with secret technology. But the difference between so many of those other letters and this one is that he was right.
From WNYC, I'm Manoush Zomorodi, and this is Note to Self.
Things that were laughed at 15 years ago, 20 years ago, today are actually working and working really well.
Technology changes faster than we're able to adapt to it.
The show where you and I find balance in the digital age.
There's no law against creepiness, oddly enough.
You still can make choices about the role that these technologies play.
And figure out how to manage modern life. This week, surveillance. And a chance to double your listening pleasure. We're collaborating with our friends down the hall at WNYC, Radiolab. You'll get 2 different shows with 2 very different angles on what it means to live in a society where we can be constantly watched and tracked. If you heard us on Radiolab and that's how you found us, welcome. We are a podcast about the human side of technology, and Jad will be joining us later in the show. If you haven't heard our Radiolab episode, please check it out. We are super proud of it. But before you head over there, right here, right now, get ready for one man's story which could change the way you think about your phone and how you think about secrets. It's kind of a mashup between Breaking Bad mixed with Edward Snowden plus a sprinkle of Unabomber and a dash of Jason Bourne. Yeah, lots of crypto machismo, and I can't help but thinking this crazy situation would never have happened in a world run by women. But here we are. And with me is Note to Self producer reporter Alex Goldmark. Hi, Alex. Okay, so Alex, you discovered the person who brought to light what might become a huge breakthrough for citizen privacy.
Yep.
He is who we have to thank for uncovering how we now know it is just so easy for the police, or anyone really, to track us using our cell phones, even listen in on us, but I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, before we get to the tech, let's talk about the case of Daniel Rigmaiden and the Stingray.
And it is just as epic as it sounds.
Let's start in 2007. Daniel Rigmaiden is in his 20s, living in Northern California, not far from where he grew up in a small suburban town. Super smart, but kind of aimless. He likes to tinker on his computer on his own, and he's just not really sure where he fits in.
Sometimes society gets overwhelming for someone who doesn't really agree with participating.
Politicians, the government, he just doesn't really believe that any of them are actually working for the people. He definitely does not buy into the system.
So he fills his backpack with groceries and camping supplies, and he heads into the wilderness for weeks at a time.
The Los Padres National Forest in California, it was just kind of a way to get away from a system that I didn't agree with, I suppose. And I was just kind of taking a break from society at that point.
He only comes out of the woods when he needs to buy more supplies, and his stream of income? Filing fraudulent tax returns using the identities of the deceased. Yeah, dead people.
And I would come out occasionally, maybe once every 3 weeks to a month, to file more tax returns from hotel rooms using just a laptop computer that I had and an air card that was registered with Verizon. And it would give me internet access through cell towers.
Cell towers. You'll hear why that's an important detail in a minute.
So I would come out just long enough to file the returns and go to the ATM machines to withdraw the money.
The most time-consuming part of the whole fake tax return scheme was just taking out the cash.
You know, I basically had to go out to the ATM machines every day. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't be able to do it, and I would actually lose money because the debit cards would get canceled by the debit card companies because they would suspect there's some type of fraud. Got to a point where there was a lot of time spent just kind of walking to ATM machines to get money pulled out.
So his system is tiring, but it works. He is withdrawing thousands of dollars, and he is super careful. He uses fake IDs. He is always anonymous when he goes online. He uses prepaid debit cards. Daniel's scheme is solid.
And it's going so well, he decides to rent an apartment in Santa Clara, California, and hunker down for one last big score. He wants to save up enough to be able to leave the country and get a fresh start.
Meanwhile, he doesn't know the FBI is on his case. They trace the fraudulent tax forms back to the ATMs, and they get their hands on some grainy security camera photos.
And so one afternoon, in the summer of 2008 now, Daniel leaves his apartment building to go get some lunch, and it all goes down.
And I turned around and I saw this guy kind of coming after me, so I started walking faster and he started speeding up.
Daniel walks towards a strip mall near the train station.
And I guess they thought I was going to the Cow train station, but I was actually just going to buy a sandwich.
Daniel sees the man flag down a local police car. He's definitely FBI.
Those two police officers started kind of circling around and spotted me kind of ducking behind this bush.
So the local cops speed around the corner.
And I took off running, and another police car joined in the chase.
By the time he's nabbed, there are multiple police cars, sirens blaring, and a slew of FBI agents on the scene.
Daniel's lying there, cheek on the pavement, and his brain starts trying to pinpoint just how the police were able to find him when he had such a foolproof system.
The instant I was getting arrested, when I was laying on the sidewalk getting handcuffs put on me, I instantly knew that they had tracked the air card down. I mean, it was the only weak link in the whole operation.
His cellular internet air card, the thing he used to connect to the internet to submit those tax returns.
The cellular Wi-Fi card must be the weak link.
And as far as he's figured, there is no way to trace one of those Wi-Fi cards to any specific person or location.
So how the heck did the FBI use or tap his Wi-Fi card to figure out exactly where he was on that summer day? At this point, Daniel has some time to try and piece the mystery together.
Yeah, because he's in prison. He spends all his time in the prison library focused on this, and he starts to come up with a theory. And if his theory is right, he realizes he's in a situation that maybe no other criminal had ever been in before, and one that he thinks raises huge constitutional questions, too.
Yeah, but his theory makes him sound like the craziest conspiracy nut job ever.
I was trying to explain these different theories to my first attorney on how the air card was located.
Daniel tells his lawyer, hey, look, I think they tracked me down by sending rays into my living room that could figure out who and where I was based on the cell signal from the air card. And remember, this is late 2000s, pre-Ed Snowden. His lawyer is like, right, sure.
Eventually, I get a letter in the mail, him telling me that he's going to withdraw from the case, and not really giving me a reason why. And, that was kind of the first attorney.
Daniel goes through more attorneys. A year passes. He is still hell-bent on proving that he was tracked down by some kind of secret government device.
Keeping in mind that Daniel's theory has never been mentioned in any court or anywhere else, it sounds like complete crazy talk to the lawyers.
So I was thinking the only way out of this would be if I represented myself, which would allow me to do the research on my own. I had unlimited time to do that kind of stuff.
He asks for all the documents that he can think of asking for, anything. And then all the same knack for detail and focus and discipline that made him a good tax fraudster, it made him one hell of a good jailhouse lawyer. Eventually, he gets shipped, over time, 14,000 pieces of paper, and he gets down to reading every single one.
Yeah, there was enough documents where whenever they moved it around, they were loading them up onto a pallet and getting a hand truck and pulling them around the jail.
He's wading through thousands of pages of government records trying to find mention of a device that he thinks must exist.
Then, an FBI file mentions something about investigative techniques regarding a cell tower. A status memo from a postal inspector, it mentions something called a stingray. A few names of companies, there's a few hints here and there.
Lots of clues, but how can he piece them all together? Because, by the way, the prison library, it doesn't have the internet.
If there was something I wanted researched further on the internet, I'd have to get on the phone and call up the court-appointed paralegal and basically explain to him what I wanted searched on.
Okay, this is my favorite part. He has to do what we're calling human-assisted Google searches to find these things that are buried deep, deep on the fringes of the web. And luckily, that court-appointed paralegal on the other end of the phone was a deep well of patience.
I would tell him what to search, and he would type it in to his computer, and he would read the results back to me. And I would tell him what to click on, and eventually he'd print stuff out and mail it to me. I'd circle a link and put a note, get this document next, and then I would mail it back to him. It was just a real tedious, long process as far as trying to get information.
Google search in the most analog way possible. So Daniel would see an unusual serial number in a court document. Then he'd have to go back to the paralegal to search that number online, see where else it turns up. Then Daniel would ask for more documents about what he finds. It goes on and on.
Eventually, all those painstaking searches and all those boxes of documents lead to a datasheet about a device that matches the mystery one he'd been hunting for.
Bingo.
It's something called the Stingray, made by a company in Florida that makes high-tech tools for the police and the military. He used that to find more documents about it. I mean, we're talking things like a town council committee mentioning a debate of a new purchase, or like a comptroller of a small city reviewing a contract.
And it looks like lots of police departments around the country have this device or something like it, and they've been using it hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Daniel realizes he probably isn't the only one who got caught with a secret cell tracking device.
But nobody has ever mentioned it in court before. No other criminal has ever figured it out.
Until maybe now. Coming up, what exactly Daniel Rigmaiden discovered about how the FBI and police were tracking criminals down, and what kind of information it scoops up on all of us. Plus Radiolab's Jad Abumrad. On last week's Note to Self, we tried to figure out how reading on a screen is different than reading on paper, and what it's doing to us. A scientist told us we have to train our brains for both kinds of reading, and some of you wrote in to say that you use that difference productively. Ryan McMichael from Leesburg, Virginia, has a system that's sort of a convenient combo. When he goes to the library, he checks out both the ebook and the paper version.
The only issue that really comes up is then syncing my position between the two, but it's a relatively minor thing, and overall, it's a pretty good method.
We love these life hacks. Michael, that's so good. Keep these life hacks coming. And the other thread going about our last episode is how screen reading is changing writing. Novelist Pam Beshars used to write entire chapters in one long focused sitting. Not anymore.
Now I'll write a little chunk, and then I'll jump over to another part of the chapter and write that, and I'll go backwards, and I stitch the pieces together in the end.
And Marissa Gowdy is trying to figure out whether her writing style is changing for this world of hyperlinks.
If we know that people are only going to be skimming something because it's appearing online, how are we writing? I think we still have to write with such a great degree of attention because you can't skim write, right?
Right, Marissa. Okay, listeners, your comments and questions drive our future shows, so we'll be coming back to this. I'm eager to hear what other people out there think. Please keep the voice memos coming. Don't y'all sound good? Record them using any old voice memo app on your smartphone, and then email it to notetoself@wnyc.org. We've also got a post that explains exactly how to do this. If you've got any questions, just go to notetoselfradio.org. We'll be right back.
Note to Self is supported by Braintree, the online payment solution used by companies like Uber, Airbnb, Living Social, and others, making the payment experiences in these apps seamless. With excellent customer service and simple integration, Braintree prepares companies to grow from their first dollar to their billionth. To learn more and for an initial $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/NTC.
We're back. I'm Manoush Zomorodi, and this is Note to Self. I'm with producer-reporter Alex Goldmark. Alex, let's pick up our story about Daniel Rigmaiden, a tax fraudster who thinks he may have uncovered secret technology being used by U.S. law enforcement.
Right, so Daniel is convinced that U.S. law enforcement is using a secret something, maybe called the Stingray, to track down people via their cellular devices. And he decides to get in touch with Christopher Segoyan.
I am the principal technologist with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project.
This is a guy who pays very close attention to all the different tools that law enforcement are using. And he gets lots of letters about police surveillance, which mostly sound kind of delusional.
Handwritten letters, sometimes from jail. Some of these letters include references to mind control or aliens or Fidel Castro controlling their brain via radio waves. And in 2011, I got one of these, and it was something to the effect of, the government has tracked me using a secret surveillance device that sent signals through the wall of my house. And they don't want to talk about this device, they don't want to talk about the technology, but I think you'll be interested to learn what I found. And this was like so many letters that I've received, right? So many people believe they have been secretly tracked with secret technology. But the difference between so many of those other letters and this one is that he was right.
How did he know he was right? Well, along with the letter, Daniel also sent an extremely thoroughly researched report.
It must have been 200 pages, and it was meticulously written, which is even more surprising when I learned that it had been written in a jail library without an internet connection. And what he'd done is he'd collected every single publicly available source he could on stingrays and built this argument to support the idea that the government had used this technology to find him. It was fascinating because it was the most well-researched memo I'd ever seen on this technology, written by a guy, rotting in jail.
The argument that Daniel laid out in his report completely convinced Christopher Soghoian.
He was 100% spot on. The government really did send signals through the wall of his living room, and in fact the living rooms of everyone else in his neighborhood. And they really were trying to keep this thing a secret.
This thing is a cell site simulator, basically a fake cell phone tower. It can talk to any phone nearby and trick the phone into thinking it's just talking to a regular, real cell phone tower. And then from there, it can do a bunch of other things to the phone, the most important of which is locate it.
They're often called by the brand name, which is Stingray, or the very technical term, IMSI catcher, IMSI. And either way, to use it, police start off with the unique ID of the device they're after.
So the police go to Verizon and they say, where is this target? We're looking for this guy. Where is he? And Verizon says, we're not able to tell you exactly where he is, but we think he's, within a mile or two of this place.
This is where the Stingray comes in, and the basic principle is like the game Marco Polo.
So the Stingray says Marco, and all the phones in the neighborhood respond back by saying Polo.
Ping from the Stingray. Response from the phone. Ping from the Stingray. Response from the phone. Hey, are you there? Yeah, I'm over here.
The police will show up there with their special surveillance van, which probably won't say surveillance van on the outside, and they will start to drive around that neighborhood with the Stingray turned on and with this antenna mounted on the roof, and it'll start to send out these signals. And they'll drive it around until eventually the phone responds to their Marco signals.
Then it's just a matter of moving in. Listen for the pings, drive even closer, listen again, move in closer until you end up right on a doorstep.
It's extremely useful. It's like a genie in a bottle. You rub the device and ask it where someone is, and they tell you where they are. It's extremely powerful.
The military and intelligence communities designed them that way. Chris Soghoian says Stingrays are attached to drones that fly over Yemen and Somalia. They're on the roofs of U.S. embassies.
Used to pick up the phone calls of Angela Merkel and other interesting people. These devices are in the president's motorcade and protect him from IED attacks and alert the Secret Service to people who shouldn't be near the president.
The government has this powerful genie in a bottle of a secret weapon to fight crime, but here's the thing. The side effect? It also scoops up data on all the other innocent cell phones in the area. Everyone else saying, Polo, Polo, ping, ping, ping.
Law enforcement and the companies that make the technology certainly didn't want the public to know that they were using it. Look, in a perfect United States, when we have privacy trade-offs like this, we're supposed to talk about it as a society. We're supposed to write up laws and rules and regulations. In this case, though, that would defeat the very purpose.
And this is sort of this fundamental question, this fundamental issue that comes up in many, many areas of surveillance, which is the agencies that use these technologies believe that the more people who know about them, the easier it will be for targets to evade surveillance.
Which is probably true, because if they know about how a Stingray works, they'll just take the batteries out of their phone or laptop. So the government has set up a crazy catch-22 in the legal system around Stingrays.
If you're a criminal defendant and you figure out that the government used a Stingray in your case, you just won the lottery, basically.
So you just won the lottery because the police will probably drop your case rather than divulge that they've been using a Stingray to catch you.
And in fact, they may even be required to drop the case. I actually got a hold of a non-disclosure agreement from the FBI sent to an upstate New York police department. It said, you have to sign this if you are going to get a Stingray. Okay, here's one of the clauses. It essentially says you cannot disclose publicly how a Stingray works. Not anywhere, not even in court.
When we asked the FBI about this, a spokesperson emailed us back, writing, "To date, the FBI has not required any agency to dismiss their case based on this provision in the NDA." And about how stingrays can scoop up information on innocent cell phones too, this is what he wrote back. "The FBI purges its cell site simulators at the end of each operation and does not retain third-party cellular information incidentally collected in the process of locating or identifying the targeted cellular device."
But the FBI is just one agency. U.S. Marshals also use these, local police, sheriff's departments, lots of agencies.
Yeah, and the spokesman also wrote, "Certainly I am speaking here only of the FBI's use of cell site simulators. I cannot comment on any state or local law enforcement use. Hope this helps." I like that he added that, Alex. It did help.
And as for Daniel Rigmaiden, thanks in large part to him, now if you Google the word stingray, you get a handful of articles that are explaining this device.
You'll also get marine biology photos and tributes to the crocodile hunter, but yes, stingray technology turns up also.
But when Rigmaiden started searching, there was no reporting on this. All of the news coverage of this, all of the briefs from the ACLU about stingrays, they are all because Daniel Rigmaiden found that name on the 13,000th piece of paper in the prison law library. That is the reason. Otherwise, every mention of it might have stayed sealed, just like it had for years before, and pretty much mostly stays sealed now.
But Alex, let's just remember, even if he is a tech transparency hero to some, Daniel Rigmaiden was guilty of tax fraud.
Yes, he is a convicted felon, and he knows it. He ended up pleading guilty and taking time served after about 5 years in prison while fighting his case. And now he's struggling to get by financially because businesses aren't so keen to hire a convicted fraudster or let him anywhere near any financial information of any customer.
You can't blame them, really.
No, and he doesn't either. But he is an ace legal researcher, and as part of his guilty plea, he also got sentenced to community service, so some of which he did at a soup kitchen, and the rest interning at the ACLU teaching them about stingrays.
Of course.
And since Daniel is something of an expert in cell site simulators now, he's found himself being asked to consult for lawyers and even for legislatures. Washington State recently passed a bill requiring a warrant before a stingray can be used. Daniel helped the author of the bill write some of the language.
So he started out wanting to drop out of society, and now he's writing policy.
If I can't completely step away from it, then I suppose I have to join in and do what I can to change it and make it better. So it's something that I can deal with more as I move on. It's kind of how I see it now.
Okay, so listeners, those are the facts. And now someone else has joined us in the studio. My colleague and friend, Radiolab's Jad Abumrad.
Are we colleagues? I mean, we are colleagues. Are we friends?
Come on,
I think
man,
we're friends. No, it's good. I felt a sense of warmth when you said that.
Good.
Hello.
I'm glad to hear that. Hello. So, I mean, we're definitely friends because we have been wrestling with this issue of surveillance over the last, I'm going to say, year and a half, actually.
Has it been that long?
It's been a while.
And wrestling is a good word. I
Yep.
think that's true, yeah.
And so here we are. You know, we talk about something completely different on the episode that we did with you on Radiolab, which I'm hoping people will listen to. But on this show, I feel super conflicted about this, Jack, because on the one hand, you know, catching dangerous people before they do harm, that seems like a no-brainer. But on the other hand, I feel really uncomfortable about law enforcement using technology that they don't want me to know that they have.
I share that sense of ambivalence. I mean, because it has a lot to do with how you talk about it. I mean, if you talk about it as, you know, we looked into a case where police used stingray to catch a rapist, but then because of the Fourth Amendment challenges, basically had to let him off. And in that context, I think, oh, well, they should be able to catch the rapist. I mean, come on. If you talk about it in that light, I somehow side with the police. If you think about, though, what the stingray is actually doing, it's essentially, as a police van is riding through a neighborhood and, you know, calling out and getting all these pings back, it's essentially reaching into the apartments of potentially thousands of people at once, which is creepy, frankly. It feels very invasive. So if you think of it that way, I switch sides and I think, no, this is not something we need.
Okay, so let me put it to you this way. Let's say there's, I don't know, something happens in Ferguson, Missouri, and there are protesters, and the police start to use the stingray or technology like it to figure out who's protesting.
I guess what I would hope is that there's some kind of judicial oversight. But if they're making the call on their own, I'm not cool with that.
And right now, only 2 states have passed laws requiring a warrant for using a stingray. And most other states require a much lower bar to pass or nothing at all.
And on a personal note, now that you know that your phone, this device that knows you so intimately, now that you know that it's not necessarily secure, what do you feel?
I think part of me already knew that. Part of me already knew that it wasn't secure and that...
Thank you, Edward Snowden.
Yeah, maybe it's Edward Snowden, but maybe it's just, that's why we have them, right? So that we never have to be alone. We never have to be alone with our thoughts. So there's some way in which everything that's happening, we've already said yes to, even if we didn't explicitly say yes to it. So it doesn't surprise me on that level. I tell you what does surprise me. It surprises me on a technological level, but maybe in a deeper level, that one policeman can find their way to one phone. If we think of it as our phones are not secure, I'm okay. But if my phone isn't secure, suddenly that puts me in the paranoid state of mind. Maybe a tiny bit.
But we like it that the one policeman can find his way to the one kidnapper's door who's got the kidnapped kid on the run. Cannot argue with that. That is exactly what's powerful about it. The same thing that creeps you out.
But what about after World War II when they used census data to find out where all the Japanese people were and put them in internment camps?
Which isn't that different from sticking a stingray on the bottom of a plane and flying it over the protesters in Baltimore or Ferguson, which there are pretty good reports and evidence that that's what had happened. So yeah, where are we left? What do we do? What do we ask for here? We don't want it to be told how to beat this thing. Right. We don't want all the criminals to know the secrets of how to beat it.
And yet here we are talking about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the answer. We have to, at the risk of sounding Pollyanna-ish, we have to talk about it. Because as long as you keep talking about it, then it's not set in stone. It's not considered just normal.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep my phone on, and I'm going to keep making calls, and I'm going to keep location services enabled.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, seriously, I love my phone.
Okay, as I mentioned, we are really proud of our collaboration with Radiolab. Please check out the Radiolab show that we worked on together at radiolab.org. You can also hear my visit to Dayton, Ohio, to try and understand something called Eyes in the Skies, or that's what we called it anyway. It is fascinating technology and could be flying over you right now. And if you just can't get enough of Daniel Rigmaiden, he is actually starting to write a book about his whole stingray experience. Find out more at stingraybook.com. The Note to Self team is Alex Goldmark, Ariana Tobin, Andrew Dunn, and me. If you're new to Note to Self, we hope you'll hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to podcasts, because next week...
Well, we're absolutely reaching a stage where not only does the way we do divorce need to change, but it is changing for many people.
Our show is about how technology could change the way people get divorced. But could it also change the institution of marriage and how we think about commitment in the process? If you've got an idea or a question that you'd like us to tackle on an upcoming episode, or you want to let us know what you think about stingrays and other surveillance, send us an email, or even better, record a voice memo on your phone and send that to us. Or, don't worry, surveillance, the FBI will get it anyway. Our email address is notetoself@wnyc.org. We also love talking to you on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Manoush Samarodi, and this is Note to Self.